The details we're learning about the shooter at that Trump rally in Pennsylvania last week are absolutely disturbing, but what's even more disturbing is the fact that people are now saying there was a second shooter. We're going to look at some of the evidence that people are bringing forth with that claim, and I'm going to tell you if I really do believe that. And then also one additional thing that I'm going to add to this video is tell you how I believe the media has actually fed this shooting and many others, and it may not be what you think. If you like what I do, consider subscribing. Let's go and get into it. Now, what do we know about the gunman? By the way, that's how I'm going to refer to him. Gunman, shooter, kid, idiot, whatever. Everything but his name, and nor am I going to show his face because, well, I'll tell you why here in a minute. But the first thing that's really troubling is that we know he flew a drone 2 hours before the event started. Now, with any drone manufacturer, especially DJI, which is the biggest manufacturer of drones, there are flight restrictions. So if, for instance, Mar-a-Lago, there's a 30 nautical mile restriction around Mar-a-Lago. Air Force bases, if they're doing, air shows or military trials, you can't even start the rotors on those drones, much less get them up in the air high enough to survey anything. Now, I don't know how far in advance, if you have a president coming into town, if he's coming into your town, for instance, I don't know how far in advance they will set that restriction. Or if they set that restriction at all, if it's like a kind of moving thing. If somebody at one of these companies, are they actually keeping up with places that candidates are going to be, high-profile candidates? Where are they going to be? Are they setting these zones and then removing them whenever the candidate is gone? That's actually a really good question, and if they're not doing that, somebody should be doing that. Commercial drones are really powerful. They're fairly cheap now, and you can do a lot with them. So far, that's one of the most alarming things because local PD was there, everybody was there, they were scoping everything out or supposed to be scoping this stuff out. So the fact that he was just able to fly this drone. Now, of course, you can get drones really high and nobody's ever going to know they're around, even though they're really, kind of loud, or a lot of them are loud when you're close to them. You get them up high enough, you're never going to know that thing is there. The zoom, the camera capability on drones is just incredible. So depending upon the model, he may have been able to, obviously he was doing something with it. He was scoping it out, but he was even following Trump's movements for months leading up to this. Now, he was looking up Trump, he was looking up Biden, he was looking up the royal family. So unless he's tied to some crazy Iranian plot to kill Trump, maybe he was just searching that stuff just because, I don't know, but I don't think he was prepared to leave that rally alive. Now, they're also talking about 3 overseas accounts that he had. This is sketchy. I could not find a single thing on this, and I know it's going to come out probably as soon as I release this video talking about these overseas accounts. But this is something I'm watching really closely because it is sketch, especially when you hear something about the Iranians and their confirmed, well, they're denied, but they're also confirmed plot to kill the president. And that's been going on, I guess, for some time. So I have to keep up with that one a little bit more. Now, some people are making a big deal about the 50 rounds that he bought before, this rally. Apparently, him and his dad were part of a shooting range. So they would go shooting, and he would ask his dad, hey, can I borrow the AR and go to the range? Well, this was one of those days where he did that. So he ended up borrowing the AR. He hid it before the event next to one of the AC units, that AC unit, I believe, that he used to climb up on the roof. He bought 50 rounds. And let me just tell you, as a gun reviewer, 50 rounds is not a lot, right? Even if you're a competition shooter, if you're a hunter, if you own guns at all, you know that 50 rounds, that's like 1 box of pistol ammo, obviously 1 box of rifle ammo, or you can get them in 20 round boxes too. I mean, it's not a lot. They make a big deal about that. Oh my God, he bought 50 rounds. Now, what he did with those rounds is heinous, obviously. But just buying 50 rounds is not going to throw some kind of red flag. Unless you're in like a super restrictive state and they have a waiting period on ammo and you have to have a license to buy ammo. There's a lot of craziness that goes on in other states across the country, but let me just say 50 rounds is not a lot. Of course, what he did with it is just horrible. But making a big deal about 50 rounds, it's not going to throw a red flag in pretty much any state. Now here's the other crazy thing, and this is why we have more questions than answers, because we're getting all this little bit of information trickling out there, but he also did not have any social media presence. He had a Discord and a Steam. Discord is like a private encrypted app where you can send messages back and forth, but it's not like a Facebook, right? So are you telling me this kid is witty enough to use something encrypted like that because he doesn't want his messages to be seen? Maybe. By all accounts, he's smart. He's putting together bombs and things like that. Fortunately, none of those things went off. But of course, they didn't have dogs at this event either. So maybe they could have caught him right then and there if they would have had dogs. But they treated this like a loose security protocol instead of it being one of the highest security protocols that you can have. I just wish there was more here, from overseas accounts to Iranians to the royal family, and like no social media. I don't know what the hell's going on here. It's like really confusing. It's like Revenge of the Nerds meets James Bond. I don't know what the hell's going on here. It is quite literally disturbing. This kid has no social media. There's going to be a lot more that comes out about that. Of course, I'll keep you guys filled in. But man, there's just more questions than answers right now about him. What's crazy is I looked up a statistic too from 13 to 17-year-olds. I think this was in 2022. 95% of them use social media. 50% of them use social media every single day. And yet, the shooter in this case, no social media presence. Now, let's talk about that second shooter. So people started sharing things with me on, this water tower. Shadows that are moving on the tower. And then there's these clips.
The gentleman behind me, I was one seat, he was to the right of me. He could see the sharpshooter behind Trump. He said the sharpshooter shot to the left. He killed the gentleman in the water tower here.
And they had been right by the fence where the other shooter was. There was one I heard in the water tower. There was one by the fence. And
then they're showing like police cars at the base of the water tower, before shots are ringing out, I guess. So I'm like, what is going on with this water tower? Now, I had to add something to this, which is why my shirt magically changed. Never mind that, though. So I do want to talk about that second shooter a little bit more, because when you're looking at the image, first of all, why is there a camera that's like perfectly stationary on this water tower? Every other cell phone camera out there, it's going to have a little bit of shake to it and all that. But this camera is like pointed on this water tower. Unless it's a security camera, that's just far away because it looks so grainy. Regardless, you do see somewhat of a shadow kind of moving around up there. But here's the thing. None of the shots line up with that. Somebody made a fantastic graphic. Whoever it is that made this, I would love to give you credit, but I can't find the source for it. All I found was this video that was shared on X by the user here that I'm, obviously going to credit because that's where I found it. But regardless, you see where all those shots come from. Those fall perfectly in line from the building that we already know about where that shooter was. If there was another shooter on the tower shooting towards Trump, that is, it wouldn't have mattered if he turned his head at that moment because he had the perfect vantage point. Yes, he was a little bit farther out, but that's still a shot that even just a regular shooter with a little bit of experience could have made. By Trump turning his head, it only makes sense that that saved his life from the angle where the known shooter actually was, from the building and the direction that he was looking at, not from the water tower that was behind him and to the right. Nothing adds up there. Second, if that guy in the water tower was not a second shooter, but maybe a part of local PD, or maybe he was a part of one of the SWAT teams that they had up there, or maybe he was a sniper that was with Secret Service, or now I'm hearing Department of Homeland Security was actually, Jesus. Okay, so there's a lot there. But let's say that he was one of the good guys. Well, that makes it even worse. The known gunman was able to climb up an AC, get his rangefinder, be on the roof 20 minutes before the shots rang out. He was known actually an hour before. Talk about all that yesterday if you need to catch up with that stuff. But that makes it even worse knowing that he was able to climb up and do all of that with somebody that was basically right over the top of him. Now there's some images being shared that say there was cops at the base of the water tower. That's simply not true. It's only because of the angle of the camera and the water tower behind where those cops were parked that makes it look like they were right on top of it. Or, in this case, right underneath it. But when you look at a vantage point and you look at that building and that red container where those cops were parked, you can see that water tower, just estimating, is probably, I don't know, 40 yards away from where those cops were actually parked.
Aaron, what was going through your mind? What did you think when you first heard those sounds?
I thought this would do what you just said. I thought it was fireworks, 4th of July. It's been pop, pop, pop. That's what it sounded like. The gentleman behind me, I was one seat, he was to the right of me. He could see the sharpshooter behind Trump. He said the sharpshooter shot to the left. He killed the gentleman in the water tower here. Now, when I called my husband at home, who's watching TV, he said, I thought Trump hurt his ear when he went to the ground. But he said no on TV.
When you think about the witnesses, right, what they just saw was tragic. That lady actually saw Corey get killed, right? Now, there's shots going off behind her, right, according to where she's sitting, right? And we don't know if both sniper teams actually took a shot. We know that, they say that shot was 1 in a million because they could only see his, forehead and the scope. And what else did they say? Maybe some of his hair or something. I don't know. Anyways, a lot of it was obscured because of the slope of the roof. Here we go, talking about the slope again. But it was obscured because of that. And so the first thing is, why do you have to make a 1 in a million shot when you have obviously access to this water tower? That's pretty sketch. Obviously, if you had somebody on that building, you're not talking about 1 in a million shots anymore. You should have clear lines of sight. Okay, anyways. So there's shots going off behind her, right? There's at least the snipers that are shooting at her and the gunman that's shooting towards the crowd. And we don't know what happened to those bullets after they made impact with, let's say, a bleacher. There's one video I found where it looked like a hydraulic line or something got hit on a tractor or something. She's thinking that she's hearing multiple shots from multiple angles. To me, there's so much going on. I really doubt that she could tell every direction where she was hearing it from. And what she was probably hearing is those rounds either breaking off, splitting up, being, thrown in different directions, or she's hearing the sniper shoot back, and she's hearing, of course, those 8 rounds coming in, and then what's happening to those rounds afterwards. It's really hard to say, and in that moment, that's why they say, if you're in a self-defense shooting, you never talk to the cops initially. You tell them that you're willing to cooperate with the investigation, but you have to talk to a lawyer first, because things that happen that quickly, adrenaline's rushing, you are going to make a mistake when you talk to a cop initially, and that could be incriminating to you. So unless you're trained in those situations, you may be able to tell where, I have no doubt she could tell where those shots are coming from, right? But what I am saying is that if she's hearing shots from behind her, it may not have been from the water tower's direction. It may have been behind her from the sniper, but not necessarily from the water tower. And then the last thing, how is the media actually responsible for all of this? Well, let me just tell you that copycat killers absolutely are a real thing. After Columbine, there was actually 400 separate attempts on different schools, and when I say attempts, threats on different schools because of the notoriety those two got. Documentaries, movies, so many YouTube videos. Just insanity. And it was well before YouTube when they blew these 2 kids up. Well, this shooter, same situation. He's looking at the shooting, right, where his parents got convicted of involuntary manslaughter because they weren't paying attention to the kid, they weren't taking his calls for help seriously, and then, of course, he had access to a firearm. Even after Parkland, I think there was 689 different threats on schools around the nation after that, right? Because it was just, it was everywhere, right? Sandy Hook, Las Vegas, all of these. anytime these things happen, and the reason this one's so big, let's be honest, is because President Trump was shot, right? If this would have just happened, I don't know, at a baseball game where nobody, you would have never heard about this, right? So that's why this is not a mass shooting event or a mass tragedy event. I'm trying to circumvent TOS here while I'm talking about this stuff, but it's not one of those, but it's so high profile because of who is involved here, right? But my opinion, we already know that he was looking up a major depressive disorder, right? Could have been fixed, medication. We don't know what signs were ignored. That's something that's yet to come out. But what we do know is that these shooters are influenced by others because of the notoriety that they get. Whether they're alive or not, they continuously talk about them. We've heard the name over and over and over. Everybody knows his face now. And guess what? There's some other kid that's messed up in the head with irresponsible parents that aren't locking up their firearms or maybe aren't paying attention to them. And unfortunately, it's going to happen again until the media realizes that, oh, okay, all right, we gotta restrain ourselves from capturing a headline and getting clicks. You're never going to see a change in this because copycat killers just absolutely will continue the more they plaster his face everywhere. That's why you haven't heard me call him by name in this video, because it just adds to the problem. It's already been done now, but every single time they continue to do this, and they're continuing to produce these copycats, and it'll keep happening until they stop. There you go, man. That's what we know about the shooter. That's what my beliefs are about the second shooter, and also media's responsibility and all of this. So I'd love to hear your response. I'd love to hear anything maybe you've heard that I haven't. Make sure you leave a comment down below. Whether you agree or disagree, let me know what you think. If you like what I do, consider subscribing. See you in the next one. And as always, hold 'em down.